All right, we're back. Episode 24. This is Off the Edge. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. Joining me, as always, is Cameron Lynch, former NFL player, played with the Rams and the Buccaneers. In case you didn't know, you can go follow him at Cameron Lynch 50. You can follow me at JK Bogan, and you can follow the show on Twitter at Off the Edge Show. But we're back. We're continuing on with this really fun series. I've absolutely enjoyed going through these positions with you, my guy. We're at edge defenders now. Got a lot of good pass rushers in this league. But, you know, I put an emphasis on edge defender because it means just as much to rush the passer as it does to set that edge and stop the run. So I'm excited.
Yeah, no, there's people on Twitter jumping in like, wait, aren't defensive ends defensive linemen? And yes, it's all an umbrella thing, but I think defensive ends are a little bit more special, Jake. I think they're a little bit more special. The reason why I say that is because there's a lot of them that can be in this top 10, right? There's going to be, I think, a larger honorable mentions list for this one. So folks that are listening, tune into the honorable mentions. I know I keep saying that every episode, but anytime we post our list on Twitter, people are like, what about this guy? What about that guy? And I'll never forget DeAndre Hopkins. I think I left him off my list, and I forgot that we talked about him in the honorable mentions. And one of my former coaches, Paul Spicer, he played defensive line and he coached me at the Buccaneers. He's like, yo, Cam, how you not going to list D-Hop, fam? Like, what's good with that? And I'm like, oh, no. So to that point, these are honorable mention guys. And a lot of times some of the best players in the league aren't on this top 10 because who's on this top 10 are guys that are performing the best. So just a little caveat there for folks that are listening, but super excited to jump into the defensive ends here.
Oh, without a doubt. And it's so these edge defenders, I mean, they just continue to get more athletic every year. We've talked about that. One guy I want to mention in the honorable mentions, before we get into it, and we do have Bet Online, by the way. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to a guy that I think has really come up. He's one of my favorites in the league, Josh Uche, from the New England Patriots. Second round pick, absolutely loved him in the draft coming out of Michigan, and kind of like in that same mold as like a Uchenna Nwosu that can play off ball, can play off the edge. I'll have funny off the edge. So I just want to mention him because he's in a different spot. He's not an honorable mention, so to speak. He's somebody I think could be in the top 10 this upcoming season. So I want to throw him in before we get into it.
And also Brian Burns as well. I don't know if you had him in your honorable mentions, Jake. But Brian Burns, I had to shout him out really quick, but I know we got to jump into our ad read, Jake, but just in case, right? Like there's some guys who may not jump into our honorable mentions. There's some guys who won't. You mentioned Uchenna Nwosu, but Brian Burns, that's a kind of a group that I had here, but they didn't jump into my honorable mentions, Jake. So I hope you could talk about it a little bit later.
Oh, man, I love Brian Burns. He's one of my favorite pass rushers. He will be in the top 10. So I can assure you, we are not going to miss Brian Burns, but we're also not going to miss that Bet Online is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines and the latest matchup reports for this year's NBA playoffs. BetOnline is your sports intel headquarters this season as we have you covered for all your insider sports wagering needs from basketball, MLB, NHL, golf to UFC and boxing. The fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code Bleav to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. Cam, we're starting with the honorable mentions. All right. I got Josh Sweat. All right. I had a hard time leaving him out of the top 10. I think Josh Sweat is awesome. And I thought he was awesome coming out of the draft. And I feel like just, I don't know, he got slept on. And he's pretty much what I expected coming out of Florida State. He ran a 4.5, which is ridiculous at his size. A true perfect size for the outside linebacker edge position at 6'5", 265. He is a former 4th round selection, and I feel like he's just gotten better each year, but this past year was just such an improvement. And you could say, oh yeah, you know, you're the product of guys around you, the Eagles, all that, but just wanted to throw him out there. Josh Sweat, as well as Montez Sweat, Cam, who's also a baller in Washington. All the sweats. Give me all the sweats. So, I got Trey Hendrickson as well as Danielle Hunter, Josh Allen, the pass rusher, not the quarterback.
Yeah, who made the Madden cover? Josh Allen, the quarterback, didn't make the Madden cover, which is pretty cool.
And then Von Miller, who, I think is going to get a little forgotten because of the torn ACL last year, but he's still one of the best pass rushers in football. And he didn't make my top 10, but he's really darn good.
Oh, okay, Jake. And it's funny that you say that because I was wrestling with my top 10. I think I brought up the DeAndre Hopkins piece and how I didn't have him in my top receivers list. So I was like, you know what? You're not going to fool me with this one because defensive ends, I do think, Jake, once we post this, it's going to get a little tricky. Guys are like, what about this guy? What about that guy? So that's what we talked about. The honorable mentions being really important. Uchenna Nwosu, Brian Burns, they were on my honorable mentions, Jake, but they were kind of like at that sub tier. Some of the people that I want to highlight, Hassan Reddick, right? You talk about sweat. So I got Hassan Reddick on my honorable mentions. I know he's going to probably be on your list, Jake, and a lot of other people's lists. But going back to the DeAndre Hopkins piece, I had to put some of those OGs on my top 10. So I got Hassan Reddick, Jake, as on my honorable mentions. I know we're going to cover him later, and I won't even talk about him too much here. I'll wait till you cover him, and I'll add on. Second, Shaquille Barrett as well. I'm not sure if you have him on your list at all, Jake. Can you give me a heads up or a nod there? No. Okay, good. I'm gonna pause on Shaq Barrett. I think we talked about Shaq on our previous episodes. I think we talk about Shaq and what he's going through as of now, currently. Our prayers are out to him. That's full stop. That's a full stop there. But let's just talk about some of his gameplay, Jake. What he's been able to do. Some of the notes I have for him. I mean, he's one of the top paid defensive ends in the league. So he's getting $17 million a year. So that's a full stop there. He's coming out of Colorado State. So that's a school. Colorado has great football players, Jake, but from Colorado State, not many. So the fact that he's coming from Colorado State to then find success in the NFL, I think that's really special. At one point, Jake, I believe he had about 18 sacks on the season. I think this was like 2018. He had a crazy amount of sacks. So like I said, I always want to highlight a guy like him. As in Shaquille Barrett, he went to the Buccaneers, and when the Buccaneers made their run in the championship and they won the championship, he was a big part of that, Jake. He was a big part of that momentum. I remember me leaving the Buccaneers and him coming onto the team. That team changed, like it was night and day. Some of the things I have for him, Jake, he's not necessarily Von Miller, but he reminds me of his get off is kind of like Von Miller. I think Hassan Reddick gives me more of the Von Miller, just the way they move. They're a little bit shorter and the way that they operate. So, shout out to Shaq Barrett. And then my third one was Josh Sweat, Jake. You mentioned just, the things that he does. And I love his celebration. One of my favorite celebrations when he wipes that sweat off his brow. So I really appreciate that. And like I said, I'll wait to chat about Hassan Reddick a little bit later, Jake, but those are my honorable mentions. Folks, note them, write them down, because we put our list out. These guys won't be on that list, but I'll pass it to you, Jake, for your top 10.
Yeah. So my top 10, it's going to be, I think both of ours are going to, push some people. All right. I think it's going to surprise some people here. So number 10 here, I have Alex Highsmith of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay. I think what Highsmith has done with Pittsburgh has just been incredible. And I understand that might be a surprise. He doesn't have, the most pressures. The guy had 15 sacks. I think what needs to be said is when TJ Watt goes down with an injury, Alex Highsmith has to step up as the guy. And he doesn't have that help, TJ Watt, coming off the other side. So I think, and I understand I'll get probably some pushback. And I think Josh Sweat, who's number 11 for me on this one, just outside of the top 10, is definitely a fair argument. But I like Alex Highsmith, guy, again, 15 sacks, 55 pressures. I'd like him to be a little bit better against the run, but I think he's pretty solid in his own right. And he just continues to get better and better. And, he's a really, really talented player that I think just isn't getting enough credit. So I don't know what it is. The Steelers, they're a world-class organization, but Hayward doesn't get enough credit, and I don't think Alex Highsmith gets enough credit. So he's number 10.
Yeah, I like it. I think the Steelers, Jake, they do the right thing every time. It's not the sexy thing, but it's always the right thing. Similar to like the Patriots, where it's like the Patriot way. We do the right thing every time, and we win, or we used to win when Tom Brady was there. So, yeah, the Steelers don't always get that shine, but TJ Watt, that's someone to reckon with. You talk about Cameron Hayward; these are Hall of Fame players, and so that's respect there. Jake, number 10 on my list. I'm gonna have to go with a Syracuse guy, Jake. I just got to show respect, man. I mean, this guy I think can take over the game at any time he wants. I think he can get 3 sacks in the game anytime he wants. I think he can take the ball away from the quarterback or a ball carrier at any time he wants. And I'm a Chandler Jones. Like I said, the whole DeAndre Hopkins piece, I left him off the list, and I was like, ooh, I'm gonna do better. And so I'm gonna make sure that people know, like Chandler Jones, even though his production wasn't as high as we all want him to be, because he's a guy like Max Crosby across the way that's eating up a lot of the things, right? Chandler Jones only had 5 sacks this past year. In 2021, he had 11 sacks and first with 6 forced fumbles. So he's getting towards the end of his career, Jake. But this guy is I want to say a home run type player. I know I say that a lot. He's more of a grand slam type player. Like I said, he can get 3 sacks in one game. He can strip the ball and go score a touchdown in one game. And I mean, at one point he was the best player in the league, I would say, when he was with the Patriots, right? He was a force to be reckoned with. So, he's now with the Raiders. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do with him. But Chandler Jones, utmost respect to that guy. Like I said, Sackman Jones, I played with him at Syracuse. One of the most impressive people that I've ever played with, outside of Aaron Donald, of course. But I got Chandler Jones number 10 on my list.
So I like Chandler Jones. I think he's definitely a talented pass rusher, and I remember the 5-sack game he had. I think it was a couple years ago against the Titans.
Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, he's still kicking. I got number 9 here, though, a guy who's still kicking, doing it well. He left Baltimore. He signed a lucrative deal with the New England Patriots. You already mentioned the Patriot way. Matthew Judon. He is a problem. I mean, just, through and through. He was 4th in the league in sacks with 17. And, he's just somebody who is constantly putting pressure on the quarterback. Now, could he be a little bit better against the run? Could he be a little bit better setting the edge? Yes. But a pure pass rusher, he's so good that I'm going to put him on this list. And I know I'm going to get some pushback, but 4th in the league in sacks, I hope I don't get too much pushback on that one.
No, Jake, it's a fair shake, I think. And the reason why I say it's fair, and I love your list, because you're thinking about more of the guys that are the best as of last year. Like, as of last year, who had the best numbers? And it's gonna be really cool to see on Twitter who reacts, right? Because for me, I kind of went with like the old school staples. Like I said, DeAndre Hopkins piece. I'm gonna respect the old heads that are really in the league and that are still kicking, but have put up numbers. And so my number 9, Jake, Buffalo Bills, went from the Rams. Von Miller, man. I mean, like, even just watching him coming out of high school, Jake, I used to watch him before every game in high school and in college. He's a quote unquote, he's 6'2", but compared to the other guys, we talk about Chandler Jones, he's 6'5", and so he's quote unquote undersized, and just the way he's able to bend, Jake, I think he has the most lethal dip in the NFL, I think, in the past couple of years, right? Where he rushes the passer and he just last second, like before contact, dips that shoulder, makes the sack. And I've emulated that from my game as well. And I got to have him at number 9, Jake. I just can't skip past him. Won a Super Bowl with the Rams, right? Came right away to the Rams and won a Super Bowl. And I'm not saying he was the sole reason for that, but I think he was some of the jet fuel for that, right? They had Leonard Floyd, who was clicking on all cylinders, Aaron Donald, and then adding Von Miller to the defense. That was absolutely insane. So I know he got injured, along his way. So some things fell off a little bit. I know last year he had 8 sacks. The year before that, he had 9 sacks, but had a chance to win a Super Bowl. But my man's coming, he got drafted in 2011, Jake. So we talk about the Cam Haywards, some of these dinosaurs that are in the league. You got to put respect on their name. I'm coming out of Texas A&M. So Von Miller, I got him at number 9.
So, I mean, Von Miller, talked about him in the honorable mention. Hard to leave him off. I think, he is getting older. We'll see what happens coming off the ACL, since it is the top 10 going into 2023. I just felt like, I'm going to leave him out of the top 10 right now. But he could definitely get back in there. And he was having a great year before the ACL tear, arguably one of his best seasons. And so, I think definitely a good one there. Number 8 for me is a young gun and a guy who's going to absolutely terrorize the league. I kind of knew it coming out of, college. it's Jalen Phillips of the Miami Dolphins. I mean, if you don't know his name, then you haven't been paying attention. You should, because the guy had 77 pressures this past year, tied with Josh Allen of the Jaguars. That's sixth in the league. And, he ended up coming away with 10 sacks. He is really good. I think all around, he's just gotten so much better. A lot of pressures, didn't get a ton of sacks, right? But just, the pressure he's applying to quarterbacks. And then you look at him in the run game. I think he's a very stout player, and I think he's only going to get better. He's got a massive ceiling. And I think, sky's the limit where, we're talking at some point, Jalen Phillips could be in that top 5, maybe even that top 3. I have a hard time putting anyone over a certain somebody that we'll get to down the road. But, I have Jalen Phillips at 8. I think he's definitely a name to look out for if you haven't been looking out for him to begin with.
Yeah, and just the Miami Dolphins in general, Jake, like we talk about that team, like these guys are cooking with grease. I mean, they got guys in their top 10. They're just armoring up, and it's going to be that AFC division. Wow. It's going to be insane. And talking about the AFC, someone I have on my team here, or as my number 8, Jake, I got to have Joey Bosa on there, man. I know he was hurt as of recent, but the Bosa brothers, you talk about the Watt brothers, purely dominant, right? You talk about some of the technicians of the game. You talk about efficiency from getting from point A to point B. We talk about that for the defensive linemen. The emphasis on getting them because they're the closest to the ball. The quickest, way from point A to point B is a straight line. Joey Bosa, as a defensive end, he's really efficient. He tries to emulate that, where he's like, okay, I'm not going to waste much movement. I'm going to figure out how to get from here to here the quickest way I can to beat my brother, who is, at the 49ers, who is also on this list as well. But Joey Bosa, like I said, he's a force to be reckoned with. Some of the notes I have on Bosa, he's getting paid $27 million, Jake, right? And so, if he's not on some people's list, he might as well be, because like I said, he's getting paid $27 million. I think he's number 2 overall, number 3, top 3 defensive ends that's getting paid. He's not seeing a lot of that money because he's in LA. But coming out of, I always got to throw that in, Jake. The business behind football, New York and California, they crush us. But my man Joey Bosa, 6'5", 280, a bigger guy, right? Different from the Von Millers and the Son Reddicks, but 6'5", 280, like I said, technician, efficient when he gets to the quarterback, and has been crushing it ever since he's stepped into the league. I know he was hurt recently, so that kind of hurt him a little bit, or dropped his stock down with only 3 sacks last year. But the year before that, 2021, had 10 sacks, and he was first with 6 forced fumbles. Like, that's insane, Jake. We talk about getting the football back to your quarterback. We know we cover Bleav in Rams as well. We talk about Matthew Stafford having to get someone to get him the football back. Joey Bosa is that guy, right? We talk about Herbert. Joey Bosa is the guy that can get him the football back. And here's Khalil Mack on the other side. So that's pretty damn impressive. And then in 2022, 3 sacks, 2021, 10 sacks. So yeah, Joey Bosa, I got him as my number 8.
I don't, but he's a guy that, again, like, there's so many guys at that position, man. There's so many guys. Like, I actually kind of forgot about Joey Bosa. Like Bradley Chubb, I didn't even mention in the honorable mentions. There's so many guys.
There's a lot.
It's tough. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, is somebody, next year that could be in this top 10. Number 7, it just shows you how freaking difficult this list is. I have a Son Reddick who, had 21 sacks last year.
Crazy.
That's where we're at. I think he is so talented, and he finally got just used correctly. He's comfortable. He comes from Temple. He's back in, the Philly area. His first year with Philly, he goes off, he had 87 pressures. I think really the issue with him is that there are just so many pass rushers that are so great. It's hard to kind of put these guys in order. But I think what was kind of the deciding factor for me is, while, he had a bunch of sacks, and don't get me wrong, that's a lot of sacks, and he was third in pressures. The run defense has to get better. And there are guys that just do it simply better. So I love Hassan Reddick. It's not a knock on him. It was hard to put him at 7, but he's at 7.
Yeah, no, I feel that that's why I had Hassan Reddick on my honorable mentions. I know he's not just busting onto the scene, Jake, because he's been there for a while, but you can argue last year he was one of the better players to step on that football field, even for the Eagles. I mean, you think about their defensive line. I mean, he's one of those better players. And you're talking about coverage skills as well, Jake. He might not have been the best in the run game, but man can cover as a defensive end. So that's pretty damn dangerous. So I have him, like I said, on my honorable mentions as well. Played in the Super Bowl, and anybody that played in the Super Bowl, Jake, we talk about it. You got to bump those guys up. We talk about Sweat. That's why he made my honorable mentions, because he played in the Super Bowl and he's a damn good player. So next on my list, Jake, I have to, like I said, I gotta pay homage to the OGs, my man. I gotta pay homage to the OGs. So the next person on my list, Jake, I have Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan, coming from the Saints. Like I said, he's been on the top 10s of these lists in the past couple of years. Maybe not everybody's list this year, but like I said, when you have the top 10 highest paid defensive ends, he's on that list, getting paid $17 million a year. And some of the notes I have for him, Jake, he's just bigger and stronger than everybody, right? He's not like your Hassan Reddick. He's not gonna hit you with a crazy ooh-wah. He's gonna have a couple moves, but a lot of time when Cam Jordan's, when he finds his success, it's really the second move. It's really the counter punch, right? He'll make his first move with speed and power, and the offensive lineman will do something, but then it's his counter where he beats a lot of people, and his effort and his motor, no matter how many years he's been playing in the football in the NFL, he still has that. So like I said, just the success he's had, 2022, he had 9 sacks. And he was 4th overall with 42 tackles, right? So not a crazy amount of sacks, not Hassan Reddick amount of sacks, but he picked it up on the tackle end. And then 2019, my man had about 16 sacks, right? In 2021, he had 13 sacks. So he's been pretty consistent throughout his career, always held the Saints down. Anytime they go to war, he's the first one out. And Cameron Jordan, to be honest, I could see him being in the front office of the NFL at some point, or a GM where he's, running the show, but he's always been a leader in the NFL in general. And I got to always show love to guys like that. So shout out to Captain Cameron Jordan. He is on my list.
Yeah. I mean, he's like the people that still use the Blackberries because they like him more than the iPhones. That's what Cameron Jordan is. Not
Exactly.
trying to kill you with the laughter over there, but no,
That's
I mean,
hilarious.
he's definitely, he's a guy that's been around for a while, very
Dinosaur.
consistent. Yeah, he's a dinosaur, but I mean, those are guys that you got to respect, and they just do such a nice job of just not dying like the dinosaurs. They stick around. So he's stuck around. He's definitely up there. Number 6 is a guy I'm a little concerned about. Okay, he should be probably in the top 3. But injuries have plagued him. I'm talking about TJ Watt of also the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got 2 guys in my top 10. TJ Watt's phenomenal. Okay. He arguably, I'm not going to even say it because Aaron Donald absolutely deserved Defense Player of the Year, but he was number 2, right? Okay. He was right behind Aaron Donald. He was just absolutely killing it. And now these injuries I'm a little concerned with. All right. I'm not saying he's an injury prone player, but what he's coming off of this past year, like, I'm a little concerned. So TJ Watt's 6 for me. I think when you look at just his body of work, he's one of the best pure pass rushers in the league, and he's solid against the run. I think really what it comes down to is this top 5 are guys that I know I've seen this past year that have either ascended or just have stayed consistent. So TJ Watt's so good, I had to put him at 6. I think he gets the nod over Hassan Reddick, who's had, a down year here and there with Arizona. And then he had this monster catastrophic season, in a good way, catastrophic, with, the Eagles. But I have TJ Watt at 6. I'm not going to forget a guy like that, and neither should you. But I think it's definitely fair to lower him a little bit. And I think there's a chance that he is 6, because I think that this league is just full of elite pass rushers.
Yeah, no, Jake, I love it. And it's funny because, like, at the end of this podcast, I'm sure my list is going to be list of Hall of Famers, the dinosaurs that are still playing. And your list is going to be like the new young bucks. So maybe we can add that in there in the creative. But TJ Watt, I have him on my list as well. I have him a little bit higher, though, Jake. I'm kind of get through the dinosaurs first a little bit. My last dinosaur on this list, Jake, is Khalil Mack. Let's not forget about Khalil Mack. I mean, one of the quotes someone told me, Benny Cunningham, actually, Jake, we got to actually get him on one of the shows, play running back for the Rams. He said when he played with Khalil Mack, I said, what's the difference between Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald? Like, what is that? He said when Khalil Mack takes off his pads, like after the game, everybody taking off their pads, there's no difference between when he has his pads on and when he has his pads off. I was like, bro, what? Like, what does that mean? He's like, his muscles are built like armor, right? Like, you know, people go in and they go warm up with certain, like, think about like James Harrison, right? Like when Khalil Mack goes and works out, people go warm up with like, you know, 15, 20s to kind of get their muscles warm. He like Khalil Mack jumping in with 50s. You know, he's hitting 100-pound weights for like his warm-up set. It's kind of crazy. And he said the way that he prepares and what he brings to the table. So I don't want to give about Khalil Mack. We talk about dinosaurs. He is a little bit older, but let's not forget he's one of the top paid defensive ends in the league, getting paid $23 million. Like I said, he's not seen a lot of it because of California being playing with the Chargers, but you know, 6'3", gotta throw that in there always. And I want people to know that, right? Because you think like, oh, players are getting paid a lot of money, let's go. And then, I mean, taxes are taking a lot of it. And you think about soccer and football. You think about some of these soccer players that are getting paid from the Saudi Arabia teams, getting paid, you know, the amount of money that teams are getting for their cap space in general, $200 million per year. So taxes are a beast, and I just want people to know that. But going back to Khalil, they know at this point, right? They know. Going back to Khalil Mack, like I said, he's 6'3", 270. You know, and got into the NFL in 2014. So he's almost a 10-year vet in the game, and it's hard to stay healthy at that point. Jake, we talked about the Watt brother, right? And he's now finding the injuries, and he hasn't been in the league that long compared to Khalil Mack. So the fact that these guys are able to stay healthy for a long amount of time, Karen Hayward staying healthy, still at the top of his game, it's a lot to say about that. But going to Khalil Mack, some of his stats here, in 2022, I have 8 sacks for him, Jake, and 2 forced fumbles. So similar to Chandler Jones, like in Von Miller, they're not really, you know, not crazy output, but they're still holding it down, striking fear in people's hearts. 2021, Jake, I have 10 sacks for him and 3 forced fumbles. So, you know, he was crushing it there. Oh, sorry, that was 2020. He had 10 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. 2021, 6 sacks, and 2022, 8 sacks. So, like I said, you know, consistent, but still dominating. And he's a dinosaur, Jake. So I think we have to hold on to these guys as long as we can. That's my list, is hold on to these guys as long as we can before they retire. But I got to respect them. Like I said, after not putting the DeAndre Hopkins in, I'm like, ooh, from now on, respect the dinosaurs.
You know who else you should respect? A guy who was picked on day 3 of the NFL draft. Look, now there are a lot of guys out there, you know, that have kind of come from nowhere. And this guy not only came from nowhere as a 4th round pick, he was in a draft class where they picked a guy in the 1st round at his position. So he said, all right, bet I'm going to be better than him. And that's exactly what he's done. And I'm proud to say I've actually interviewed him. Max Crosby, man. When I watched this guy coming out of Eastern Michigan, he just felt different, you know, and he's got the body at 6'5", 255, although he looks like he's 275 pounds the way he comes at you. Look, this guy has just gotten better each year, all right? The last 2 years alone, he has 182 pressures on the quarterback. He's got 25 sacks in those 2 seasons. He has continued to get better and better. He has 43 sacks in his first 4 seasons in the NFL and almost 300 total pressures. This is somebody that has forced 8 fumbles. He is a very, very good pass rusher, and some who don't follow the NFL religiously are going to be like, Max Crosby 5th? But the question is, am I underrating him? Because he was actually 3rd in terms of total pressures for the season last year. And I mean, PFF had him at 5th out of all of the edge defenders for their overall grade. The thing that I like about Crosby the most, he's a very talented pass rusher. He can win with power. He can win with speed. But he's so good against the run. And I think that stuff just kind of goes a little unnoticed. And so I'm going to say it. I think Max Crosby is a top 5 edge defender in the NFL, and I'm not sorry about saying it.
Yep. Don't be sorry, Jake, right? He's playing across from Chandler Jones. And so you would think, right, like, okay, Chandler Jones will get more sacks because Max Crosby's over there. And it could be vice versa, right? People know, like, hey, Chandler Jones is over there. He can get 5 sacks if he wants to. Let's make sure we block him and not really protect the guy on the other end. But Max Crosby slowly climbing his way to the top of this list, Jake. Like you said, on PFF, we're looking at it right now. He's number 4. He could be number 3, Jake, if he wanted to, right? Like if some of these other guys get hurt, Michael Parsons, whatever, he could easily be number 3. So I got him and Jake as I think you said you have him as your number 5. I have him as my number 6. So Max Crosby, we're on the same wave there. You talk about Eastern Michigan, 4th round. Think about Hassan Reddick. You think about guys like Max Crosby. You think about these guys who are climbing the ranks against players who were 1st round, top 10 to 13 picks. Like I'm not seeing many guys on these lists that are falling outside of the 13 to 15. Like these guys are like number 3, number 5, number 7, and he was 4th round. And so for him to find that success, Jake, like you said, your caps off to guys like this, and that means their ceiling is crazy high, right? The guys that go 3rd pick overall, 5th pick, that means their floor is super high, their ceiling is super high. But a guy like Max Crosby, that means his ceiling is so high and he has so much more room to grow. So he's going to be super dangerous, Jake. I'm curious. Like I said, I'm curious what the Raiders are going to do with Chandler Jones and what that's going to look like with their new draft pick. So I'm curious what that's going to look like. But Max Crosby getting paid $23 million. He's going to see a lot of that money out in Vegas, which is nice. And you talked about his numbers, Jake, 15 sacks last year. And one thing I want to call out, his run defense. That's why he's so high on this list, is his run defense. Not a lot of these defensive linemen really focus on runs. They're trying to get their sack numbers up, but he was 1st in tackles with 57 out of all defensive ends. So that means he's running to the football. That means Chandler Jones is stopping the ball on that side. That means they're coming his way, and he's collecting all the cash there. But regardless, he's showing up. He's showing out, Jake. I think I'm most proud of Max Crosby out of everybody on this list because of he's coming from the 4th round pick up to now the 4th overall defensive end in PFF and, just production. So shout out to Max, man.
Yeah. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Alex Highsmith, 3rd round pick out of Charlotte, and Matthew Judon.
Charlotte?
Yeah. And no, nothing against Charlotte.
Right.
Matthew Judon, actually, and I also definitely, this is actually a little bit more impressive. All right, Mr. Crosby's absolutely killing it, but Matthew Judon came out of Grand Valley State, 5th rounder.
HBCU.
And he's just been plugging away, just killing quarterbacks,
Yeah.
I mean, that's been his thing. He has 62.5 sacks, age 30.
And he's been, Jake, he started on special teams, my man. Like, when I played, he was on special teams, and I'm not going to lie, I got a punt blocked against Taysom Hill, actually, when he was on special teams before he started playing quarterback, Jake. And the next game we're playing the Ravens, and Judon is up. And so, mind you, like, I'm an undrafted guy, never got a punt blocked in my life. And my coach was like, yo, Matthew Judon is going to be rushing us. Cam. So every day in practice, they were watching me. And thank God he didn't really knock me on my back, Jake. But blocking a guy like Matthew Judon, getting to my point here, is a scary sight, my man. So Matthew Judon, like you talk about, like, a lot of credit to him, the way he's able to climb up these ranks. And like Max Crosby, will we see him in the top 5 next year? We'll see, but he's only getting better and better.
No, absolutely. Number 4 for me, they call him Spider-Man, Brian Burns. And guess what? He just switched his number to 0. So I wanted to move him up this list, my guy. Like, he's probably my favorite pass rusher. So it was hard for me to only have him at 4. The bottom line is he's not the best pass rusher in the game. He does have areas of his game he needs to improve on, mainly in the run, but I just love him. I love watching him. He is so explosive. There's a reason why they call him Spider-Man. And this guy, he's sticking with Carolina. There were a lot of trade rumors and whatnot. I think he's going into a season where he's going to have a great year. And, I expect him to get better. He's a young pass rusher, 24, 25 years old. It's something where, okay, you're not the best run defender now. He can be. He's got the athleticism to be. He's got the football IQ to be. He's got the patience. And, man, I just love watching him play on tape. So maybe I'm a little biased having him at 4. But I absolutely love Brian Burns.
Yeah, no, I know it's funny you say that, because when Leonard Floyd was leaving the Rams, like I said, we do Bleav in Rams, the Bleav in Rams show. When Leonard Floyd was leaving, you were like, Burns, let's go, Rams. What are we doing? So he's a baller, man. He's a baller, and young guys like that, you want them to find success, and like you said, keep climbing these ranks. Max Crosby, Burns, keep climbing these ranks. And Jake, for this list that I have here, I'm kind of getting into the spooky hours, right? With my my next couple of guys. We talk about some of these numbers, and it's like, wait, what they did, huh? So my next guy, Jake, I have here after before Crosby, Nick Bosa. We talk about the Bosa brothers. They're just dangerous, man. Like I don't know what their parents were feeding them. What was going on in that household.
Something's in the water, man.
Something's in that water, my guy. Because just his stance, right? Let's just get to the stance part. I think just when people see that on film, it might feel a little bit awkward, right? Because he's in that racer stance, like he's about to run a 40-yard dash. And I think he does it intentionally because he's like, look, it might look a certain way, but technically, this is the best way to get off the football efficiently. And I think him and Joey they're working, whoever their pass rush coach is, they're like, hey, guys, like it might look awkward to everybody else, but just believe me, you're going to strike fear in people's hearts. And that's what the Bosa brothers do, man. Like they bend really well. Their moves their counter moves are crazy. Both of their spin moves are kind of insane. So the Bosa brothers, man, they're really special, along with the Watt brothers and some of the numbers I have for Nick Bosa. 2022 first with 19 sacks. Woo! I mean, these are like Aaron Donald numbers, Jake. 2 forced fumbles, right? And I know he was competing with Michael Parsons for Defensive Player of the Year, and with 19 sacks on the season, that I see it. 2021, he was 4th with 16 sacks, Jake, and 5th with forced fumbles. Like, just causing havoc. Like, it's just crazy. These numbers are insane. And so, I have on my my notes. He makes mother effing plays in the backfield. Like, I'm just watching the film over and over again. That's also for the note for the guy that I have as my before Nick Bosa, but they just make effing plays in the backfield, and it's just super impressive. Unfortunately, Jake, we're Rams guys. We cover the Rams, but he had his way against the Rams and also the Seahawks. Yeah. Like, he went to town on the Rams and the Seahawks like it was no one's business, like you're beating up on your little sibling. Like, it didn't make any sense. So Seahawks and Rams tighten up in the offseason because Nick Bosa, he's coming with a vengeance.
He had 14 pressures in that week 4 game against the Rams on primetime. I mean, that's what Nick Bosa is. Now, he had the injury a couple years ago, so if he stays healthy, I mean, the sky is certainly the limit. He's 25 years old. I mean, he's incredible. My 3 is Myles Garrett. I think, nice. He's an outstanding player, and not as good against the run as Nick Bosa. But he had 73 pressures last year. He had 18 sacks. He's somebody you always have to know where he is at all times. He can completely blow up a play, any given play. And I have a feeling we kind of have the same top 3, just in a very, like, a different order. Yeah. So who's your number 2?
So my number 2, Jake, I actually have Micah Parsons as my number 2. So it might be a little bit different from yours, but I got Micah Parsons as my number 2. And then my number 3, Jake, I know you already said yours, but I got TJ Watt as my number 3 because I don't want to sleep on TJ Watt. I know he got hurt, but like I said, I don't want to sleep on guys like TJ Watt, which the sack numbers, right? I'm going to read them off real quick. But 2022, he had 7. 2021, he had 22. So like I said, we're getting to the spooky hours, and he had 22 sacks and 5 forced fumbles. That's insane, right? We talk about, defensive player of the year. We could talk about, MVP of the league right at that point with those numbers. So that's kind of crazy. In 2020, he had 15 sacks and 2 forced fumbles coming out of Wisconsin. He's getting paid $28 million. So he's the number 1 paid defensive end. And like I said, I got to respect his name, my guy. That's why I put him at number 3, because the numbers he puts up, I know he got hurt and whatnot, but TJ Watt is my guy. Another note I have from him is game wrecker. Makes plays in the MF and backfield. I have that for him and Nick Bosa. My man also, TJ Watt, Jake, he interceptions, right? He's jumping up, picking the ball off, running the ball back, forcing fumbles. He's one of the better players in the NFL. So I got to respect my guy TJ Watt there. And like I said, I got Michael Parsons at my number 2.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, we talked about it. I think really the issue is the injuries with TJ Watt. It's the one reason we're not putting injuries entirely into account, but going into 2023, I felt more comfortable having a top 5 guys that I saw last year. I know that they're at this level. That's why Crosby, Burns, and Garrett was number 3. Yeah. Number 2 for me and number 1. So number 2 is Nick Bosa. Okay, I think Nick Bosa is better than Myles Garrett by just a tad. I think the thing about Garrett is that he's not as good of a run defender as Bosa is. I think Bosa, if he was not allowed to rush the passer and just had to be a run defender, he'd still be one of the top 10 edge defenders in football, even if he wasn't allowed to pass rush. He is such a dominant force. You can't double team him. He breaks out of that. He sets the tone, and he's a punishing tackler. And then Micah Parsons is my number 1. I think Micah Parsons is the closest thing that we've seen to Aaron Donald.
Yeah,
he plays a different position, but I think as far as the dominance on a football field, the consistency, the work ethic, and just the likability, because I love Donald. I absolutely love Micah Parsons as a dude. Like, just like what he has put out there, like he's gone on shows and whatnot. I'm a big fan of Micah Parsons in general. So I just think when you look at what he's done, his body of work, I understand, this is going to be a fun little debate probably in our comment section between Garrett, Bosa, Parsons, Watt. I'm sure we'll have Steelers fans chiming in. Parsons was tied with Bosa for the league lead in pressures, and he had 14 sacks last year. This is a guy that can drop into coverage because he's technically
a linebacker.
He's technically a U, man. He's playing linebacker, but he also can rush the passer. And I got a lot of blowback back when he was coming out of the draft because I actually had him as a pass rusher. I had him as an edge defender. Everyone's like, what? He's not your number 1 linebacker? I'm like, no, because I wouldn't play him at linebacker because I wouldn't limit his abilities. If I play him at linebacker, he's going to be an off-ball guy. I want him rushing off the edge. I think he has a chance to absolutely tear up any sort of game plan, just his ability off the edge alone. And when you look at just his body of work, like Micah Parsons is the best pass rusher, in my opinion, in the NFL. He doesn't have more sacks. Okay. The pressures are there. And you see it. I mean, man, that Jaguars game last year, week 15, I think he had like 12 pressures. I mean, that's what we're talking about is guys that can constantly get in the backfield, can force the quarterback to get rid of the ball quicker than he wants to, and force him to get rid of the ball even if the play isn't fully developed, because that's how you win that rep. And so that's who I have for my 1 and my 2.
Yeah, I like that. I got my Micah Parsons, my number 2, Jake. I had a chance to see him at the NFL draft when I worked for the NFL. I had a chance to see him. I think he's bigger than 6'3". It says 6'3" here, but I think he's more like a 6'4", 6'5". I mean,
he's bigger than 245. I don't buy that.
Yeah, I don't buy that at all. I mean, that's a big boy. That's a big boy. And mind you, when I at this moment, I think I was 2 years out of the NFL. So to see him, I'm like, you're an off-ball linebacker, cuz? Like, you're a big dude. So, Jake, we talk about Micah Parsons, the superstar. I think you mentioned that he has a personality, right? You think about Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald, he does hop on the camera, but like not really, So, but Micah Parsons, he has that personality. You talk about the draft. I think he was on the show and he wanted Mozzie, and he showed the text between him and his coach, and like I'm getting Mozzie. So I like his personality too. The off the field is great, and that's what makes him at the top of this list. And then, going to his actual numbers that make him on the list, right? This year, 2022, he had 14 sacks. Year before that, he had 14 sacks, 3 forced fumbles both times. And so he just consistently repeating what he's done the previous year. And the craziest thing for me, Jake, when I watch Micah Parsons, is he can take over a game if he wants to, and you can't stop it. Like, think about when he was playing against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. He was like, I'm going to get to Tom. And he got to Tom. The next play, he's like, I'm going to get to Tom again. And he still got to Tom. And you would think like, okay, Tom Brady's going to like stop this with like his force, like his, stop, Micah. And Micah's like, nah, bro, like I'm on your head. And there's nothing that Tom could do about it. And so to see that, like you said, like this is the closest thing we're seeing to Aaron Donald, someone who's young and who can a walking Hall of Famer, like there's not many young walking Hall of Famers.
Second season in the league, already has 157 pressures, 28 sacks, right? He's got 6 forced fumbles. He's got 90 stops, which is anything considered the line of scrimmage or behind it. And my favorite thing is that this past year, he had 6 games where he had multiple sacks.
Yeah, bro. And like, if you see some of his film, like during the offseason, he's running against Bijan Robinson. He's running against some of these receivers in these 10-yard DeAndre Hopkins. I forget who it was. And he's beating these guys. Like he's crushing these people in sprints. I think it was Nick Chubb. It was a year ago. I think it was like a Pro Bowl and they were racing and he beat Nick Chubb. Like, he
completely changed Dallas's plan of him because they were like, you know what, we're going to use you as a hybrid. And they're like, you know what, that's even a waste because hybrids are nice and all, but it becomes a little gimmicky. I know you're the best pass rusher in the league. I'm not trying to ruin that for you. So this past year, Cam, he had 64 coverage snaps. The year prior, he had 284. What does that tell you? It tells you Dallas got the message like, all right, your thing is rushing the passer and your ability to stop the run and set the edge. That's what we're going to have you do. There's no need to play you out of position. There's no need to overdo it with the coverage snaps. We know you could drop in coverage in a pinch, but we're not going to force that on you. We don't want to have you playing a bunch of hats when we know that you are the top notch in one area. We're going to force you in that area.
Agreed. Yeah, Jake. And I think he can affect the game quicker, right? If you're dropping back and pass, you can't really affect the quarterback. We talk about that line from A to B. Like if you're on the line of scrimmage, you can affect Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers like this. And so shout out to the Cowboys for figuring that out because he is a force to reckon with. And Jake, I'll go to my number 1 really quick. Myles Garrett. We talk about, his track record, right? I know he's been in the league for a little bit now. 18 sacks this past year, 2021, 18 sacks again. The year before that, 13 sacks and 4 forced fumbles. When I watch this film, Jake, it's too easy. Like it's almost like he's not really trying. And whenever I see stuff like that, I'm like, okay, that you're playing with little kids. I mean, mind he's going against big ass linemen. So the fact that he makes the game look that easy, I'm like, okay, let's put you at number 1 and call it a day. So I got Myles Garrett there, Jake. He, the run game he has to step up with, but I got him as my number 1.
I like it, man. I like our lists. We appreciate you guys watching. We got a special happy birthday shout out. He's turning 27 today. It's Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. So happy birthday, Christian McCaffrey. The man has been on a mission, and he's coming off an incredible season with the 49ers. He has almost 5,000 rushing yards to go with almost 4,000 receiving yards. And the guy has 442 receptions in his career. On top of that, he's run the ball over 1,000 times, 38 rushing touchdowns, and he's got 22 receiving touchdowns. So pretty crazy career already. As long as he can stay healthy, man, he is absolutely going to Canton. Might already be good enough, but depending, I don't know. Yeah. But 6 years with Carolina, he's now with the 49ers. He'll be there for a while. So happy birthday to Christian McCaffrey, from our show to him.
Yeah, no, that's a big hand clap to Christian McCaffrey. Jake, coming out of Stanford, I knew he was going to be special, returning punts. And then now he's just taking his game to the next level. So it's really cool to see a guy revive his career. I think we always talk about that when we ranked our running backs. He's number 1 right now. Christian McCaffrey, happy birthday, my man. Keep crushing it.
Absolutely. So that's going to do it. We appreciate you guys tuning in. The next time you see us, we'll be doing his position, inside linebackers, but that's going to do it. You guys take care. Special thanks to betonline.ag, and we'll see you guys soon.